I want to thank you all for coming. As I say, braving the terrors of the day. I hope you all gave each other a hearty elbow bump on the way in. I'm Bob Supnik. I've been the volunteer for computers in Carlisle for the Council on Aging for the past 4 years. I've given talks on computer security in the dead of winter for the last 3 years. So I'd like to welcome you to another edition of You Bet Your Digital Life. Click on the magic link, and the birdie comes down and holds your computer up for ransomware. Today we're going to talk about these things. These little supercomputers a lot of us carry in our pockets now, and how to make them secure. Because more and more we're carrying our digital life on these devices. And they're everywhere. There are now more smartphones in the world than there are personal computers. And for people under 30, this is what they work with by preference. They don't much like PCs or laptops. They prefer their mobile devices. My favorite story is I have a grandson, my youngest grandson. When he was probably less than 2, I had been given some old cell phones that needed to be destroyed, so I gutted them and stuffed them with cardboard so that the keyboard would still work. They were like Blackberries or things. Gave them to him. And he would sit in the back seat in his car seat, and he would text us from the back seat. Speaking, of course, because, but he was pretending that he was texting. I guess he's getting prepared for being a teenager when he will text his parents from his bedroom. There are also certain services that are really useful to seniors, like the ride-sharing services, that are simply not accessible in a really safe way without a smartphone. They're inexpensive, and the low-end devices have become extremely competent. They have big screens, they're fast, they have lots of storage. In fact, whatever you're carrying around in your pocket, whether it's a high-end or a low-end smartphone, you're carrying around more computing power, memory, and storage than a Cray supercomputer from around 1990. Well, cyber criminals who target mobile devices are everywhere too, because with so many targets and so many uses, there's a natural opportunity. Even if you keep very little on your device, it might prove to be the gateway to your real computer, because you might have passwords that are common to the two machines, or accounts that you share between your smartphone and your Mac. PS, don't do that, but we'll get back to that. And finally, just tracking us via these devices is big business. There have been a couple of scandals about cell phone companies, in particular carriers, selling our location information for money. Now, do I consider it particularly informative that people know I would go to Greeno Pond every day to go for a walk? No, but there are certainly people who might be seriously offended to know that they are being tracked. So here are the steps I'm going to advise you to take today. And it starts with buying the right device. And then we'll go through how to secure your device and how to keep your device up to date. I'm going to urge you very strongly to discard any device that is no longer in support, and I'll explain why. We'll go through how to manage your accounts and your passwords that are on your mobile device, how to manage your installed applications, and how to be prudent when you're using public connections for both Wi-Fi and for power. Now, these are not at all different from what I would have told you about securing your PC or your Mac. And shouldn't be surprising. Your mobile device is a computer. It happens to be a computer that you can carry conveniently and make phone calls with. But it's just a computer. So let's start with buying the right device. If you'd like absolute assurance about security, you have several good choices. You can buy an Apple iPhone or iPad. You can buy a Google Pixel or a Google tablet. Oops, sorry, I just spoiled the joke. And that's it. That's pretty scary. That's it. And you might be saying there, particularly if you own one of these things, what about Samsung, Motorola, LG, Nokia, etc.? Well, the problem is that while Apple has total control over the iPhone, Google does not have total control over Android. So if Apple runs into a security problem or one is reported to them, they can create a fix and install that fix on every iPhone that's still in support. On the other hand, Android is not Google's. It's an open source program, operating system. The phone vendors take it, they modify it, they add to it, and Google cannot install fixes on any Android phone other than the ones it makes itself. The vendors must get the fixes from Google, test them, possibly modify them, and then distribute them. So it's the difference between kind of Windows and Linux. On Windows, Microsoft can send out a Windows 10 patch to every Windows 10 machine in the world. On Linux, the Linux Foundation can create a fix, but then Ubuntu has to go and create their version, Red Hat has to create their version, SUSE has to create their version, Mint, Debian, and so on. Now, the Linux community is really good about doing this quickly, really good. The phone vendors, not so much. Last year, a major Android publication tracked how long it took from Google publishing a significant fix until the fix was available from other Android vendors. The best case was 78 days. The worst case was never. And that means depending on which phone you had, which Android phone, crooks had from 10 weeks to forever to attack your phone using that bug. That's a serious, serious problem. But a lot of people can't afford an iPhone or a Pixel phone. They're expensive. I don't even know what the cheapest iPhone is. I'm dreading having to find out when this one goes out of support. But the cheapest Pixel you can buy is about $400, which is a lot for a cell phone. So Google has a new answer, which they call Android One. That's not a phone, that's a brand. And it's a program whereby the hardware in the phone is standardized. So instead of having all different kinds of chips and all different kinds of graphics, they all have the same thing. Furthermore, the phone vendor promises not to add anything to Android that would prevent it from being updated. They guarantee there will be security updates for 3 years, and there will be major upgrades of the operating system itself for 2 years. And you can get these phones from Nokia, Motorola, LG, etc. at pretty good price points, like $200 and below. So if you can't afford a Pixel or an iPhone and you want an Android phone, look for the Android One label. But understand the phone may have only 3 years of support. And in any case, you have to be careful, because these inexpensive phones may use components that in turn don't receive patches. So at the core of many of the low-end Android phones was a chipset from a company called MediaTek that has a bug deep in the hardware that requires a very, very thoroughgoing patch to Android, and the older phones will never be fixed. So, now that I've really gotten you all scared, let me say that many of these problems are things that professionals need to worry about, or people in high security things need to worry about. If you're using phones casually to store your photographs, to call your friends, to navigate with Google Maps, these are not such severe problems. But if you do have, like your bank access, if you do online banking via your phone, if you do your Amazon shopping via your phone, these are causes for concern. So the first step for securing your device is to put a password or PIN on it so that when you log in, it's going to give you that screen that says, put in these numbers or put in this passphrase. Now, phones may also have biometrics. This particular iPhone has a fingerprint reader, which I think is okay. I'm amazed it works because the US government fingerprint readers for fast access at Logan don't work on me. They said, your fingerprints are too worn from years of use. That they don't maintain their scanners. But my iPhone recognizes my fingerprint just fine. And I think that's good. Putting a password, a PIN, or a biometric on your phone encrypts the contents. That means if the phone gets lost and somebody takes it apart to see what you have, they get nothing. For the same reason, put an automatic timeout on your phone. That if you haven't used it for a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it locks up and goes back to the screen where you have to put your PIN in. Now, this is, again, can be annoying, but if you lose the phone, people can't get into it. And lastly, I'd say be a little cautious about using the built-in cloud services, like iCloud for the iPhone and Google Cloud for the Google phone, for the Android phones. Just remember what happened to all those celebrities whose selfies in indiscreet circumstances ended up all over the tabloids. I once got a sage piece of advice from a lawyer at one of my companies who said, never put anything in the cloud that you wouldn't want to see in the New York Times or on TMZ. So it's very useful. You got lots of photographs of your trip to Florida or your last gathering with the grandkids. Great. Beyond that, caution is advised. So the next step in securing your device is to try and deal with maintaining your privacy. And the controls in these phones are very good, but a bit complicated. So you'll find that in the Apple iPhone or iPad, there's a setting called privacy. There's a similar thing in Android. And it permits you to set up access to your information on an application by application basis. So you can say, for example, to an application, you can use my location none of the time, all of the time, or only if you ask me. So the way I've got that set up is Google Maps can have my location whenever it's running, and nobody else can. Everybody else has to ask. And I see this all the time because I have a little solitaire application on here. It's good for passing the time while you're waiting for the dentist. And every now and then, instead of hitting the next game button, I hit a button that allows you to change the cards from sort of a pattern to having a photograph from your photo collection. And it says, Solitaire is requesting access to your photos. Do you want to give it? And I always say no, because there's no button that says no and never ask me again, which is what I would like. So be very careful. If an application doesn't need access to your contacts, your phone list, the calls you've made, where you've been, just deny it. Don't let it do it. You should also limit any analytics that gets sent back to the vendors. Analytics is a polite word for for spying on you. And again, you will find deeply buried in the privacy menu of both Android and Apple phones a setting that says, no, don't do any analytics. It is not off by default. It should be. And finally, if you're paranoid the way I am, turn off Hey Siri and Hey Google, unless you really want Big Brother listening to you all the time. Now, it's very convenient to just go into the phone and say, Hey Siri, where's the nearest gas station? But that means the microphone is on all the time. It is recording everything it hears, filtering it for the phrase. Who knows what happens? There was certainly a scandal that Amazon employees were listening to conversations recorded by Alexa. And they all would say, well, we have to do this because we're trying to improve the voice recognition algorithms. To which I say, yeah, right. So I have it turned off. If you find it convenient, leave it on. It does also consume a lot of battery, I find. So that's another reason. Keep your device up to date. If your iOS device, that's a polite way of saying Apple, or your Android device says a security update is available, then install it now. Don't wait a couple of days, don't, postpone it, because the thieves are reading these security bulletins that are put out by the vendors. And they know, therefore, where to attack an unpatched phone. If your device offers automatic updates, turn them on. Windows 10 went to updates you couldn't refuse back in 2015, but Apple is more polite, and they still ask. I don't believe they should. They will install only at night, so your phone won't get out. It won't become unusable while you're using it. And they also will only install if it's plugged in to your charger. So I think it's a pretty reasonable solution. This is the hard one. If your device goes out of support, stop using it. Because one of the things that I really dislike about these devices is that they have very limited lifespans. iPhone support is only good for 5 to 6 years. Pixel is good for 5 years, and Android One guarantees 3, maybe they'll do 4. And I could understand that when these devices were $150 or $200. But if you're spending $1,500 on a Samsung, iNote 20 or $1,100 on a top-of-the-line iPhone, I don't think it's reasonable that a device costing a lot more than a good laptop only lasts half as long in terms of software support. Heck, even Linux, you can buy 10 years of support for Linux. So the problem is that the devices that are not getting patched are, to quote this headline from the Register, hopelessly vulnerable. So if you've got if you've got an Android 8, I guess Android 8 is still in support. If you've got an Android 7 or earlier, if you've got an iOS 11 or earlier device that can't be updated, it's never going to be fixed. The thieves know exactly where the security holes are, and the security holes are devastating. There are holes in Wi-Fi that permit them to basically steal your password. There are holes in Bluetooth that allow them to take over your phone. If these have not been patched, the device is downright dangerous. On the other hand, obsolete phones make great music players. You know, take the SIM card out of this, turn off the Wi-Fi, and it's an iPod, and a really nice one. They also make good doorstops, you know, keep things from rolling, things like that. But take that seriously. You know, I've been able to resurrect computers that are 11 and 12 years old, put Windows 10 on them, and have them supported with the latest operating system. Nothing you can do about an old mobile device. I'm sorry. Just, you can keep using it for showing pictures, playing music, just cut it off from the internet completely. Turn off the Wi-Fi, turn off the cell coverage, take out the SIM card. That's what you get. Let's talk about accounts and passwords. Personally, I think you ought to minimize the use of mobile devices for critical personal operations like banking. So I do not use my mobile phone the way Bank of America would like to take photographs of checks so that I don't go to the ATM. I don't even have their banking application. If you are going to do this, if you are going to have critical accounts, try and separate the account on the phone from the account on your PC. Use a different credit card. Use a different email account. So on my mobile device, I do not have my main email account. You know, if you write to me at my standard email, you know, bob@supnik.org, I never see it here. I've got a throwaway Gmail account on here, which I can use for emergencies. And for helping people in Carlisle test their email, I can send a message to them from my phone. But I just helped a senior in Carlisle whose phone was hacked because it was not up to date and it was vulnerable to being broken by receiving a specially crafted SMS text message. She didn't even have to do anything. The text message broke the phone open. The hackers stole her main email password because she had her main email on the phone. With that, they went and tried to steal her Amazon account. It's easy to do. Just, you know, you log in and say, I forgot my password. It sends a password recovery to your email. If the hacker has control of your main email, he can get control of your Amazon account, your Fidelity account, your bank account. Be very, very careful about this. And, excuse me, if you do want to have accounts, use a password manager. There are some really good ones, LastPass, a bunch of others. They're usually free for one device, and for a monthly fee, you can have it actually be portable across all your devices so that you can essentially have just one master password you have to remember, and then it remembers all your passwords for you. And it does not store them locally. It stores them hopefully securely in the cloud. Or you can get even more secure by using two-factor authentication. All right, are you familiar with two-factor authentication? This is where you try and do something and they send you an SMS text message and you type in a code. It's no longer as safe as it used to be for two reasons. The first is that the telephone system uses a control protocol called SS7 that is insecure by design, because it was designed by Ma Bell when Ma Bell was a monopoly and security was not an issue. These days, for about $10,000, anyone can attach to the phone network and basically set themselves up as a phone company, which is why we get all these blankety blank blank spam phone calls. It's cheap. That means it's possible to intercept SMS text messages and to generate phony ones. The second thing that makes it difficult is something called SIM hijacking. Ever hear of this one? So in your phone, somewhere, right there in my iPhone, there's this little tiny card called a SIM, which actually is the contract between you and the wireless company. It gives a unique identity to this phone that the wireless company then says, yes, phone number XYZ means that phone. And so if they want to send a text message to your phone, they're really sending it via the SIM card. So thieves will call up the cell phone company and say, I bought a new cell phone. Here's my account. Would you please move the number to this SIM? And your cell phone company will, by and large, say, sure. They might ask you for a few details that anybody could find out, like your address or the phone number. But suddenly, a new phone is you. Then they go and try and log into your Fidelity account. It sends a text message to their phone, and they're in. That's pretty scary to me. So there is an alternative called a FIDO key. And a FIDO key is a little USB device that looks like this, that has a cryptographic secret in it. And it uses that cryptographic secret. Cryptography is just a fancy word for sent-in code. And it establishes a unique identity between this and the owner of this and your account. So now when you go to log in, you give your name, you give your password, and it says, okay, insert your FIDO key and enable it, which you do by just pressing a little button there. And if the thief doesn't have this physical key, he can't get into your account. He may have phished your name and password. He may have guessed it, but he cannot get in. And it's usable with mobile devices too. It looks like it only goes with a USB. There are versions which have little wireless things in them. For iOS 13, it communicates with your iPhone via Bluetooth. And for Android devices, it communicates via what's called near-field communication, which is just another form of wireless. Unfortunately, they're not universal. Every major company is part of the FIDO Alliance. Very few have actually implemented it. Google has implemented it. Vanguard Securities has implemented it. You can use it to log into Windows, Mac, or to Linux. You can use it with LastPass and other password managers. You cannot use it with Amazon, Fidelity, or Bank of America. 3 institutions that need it most. So hammer on your representatives and say, they're all members of the FIDO Alliance, will you please support it? But if you're paranoid, particularly about your email, I recommend these things. I think you've all heard my story about the 2016 election, which is the Clinton campaign hired a security expert to protect their communications. And he said, oh, it's easy. You're all using Gmail. Get these things. Protect your accounts with a FIDO key. To which the Clinton campaign replied, "Oh, that's too complicated and difficult." They fished John Podesta's credentials, and the rest is history. Imagine being the guy who made that recommendation and had it ignored and seeing what happened. I mean...
And where do you get the files?
You can buy them on Amazon. The most well-known brand is YubiKey, Y-U-B-I-K-E-Y. If you want a simple one that's USB only, they're about $15. If you want a fancier one that can talk via wireless, they're about $40 to $50. And unfortunately, you need two, because if one breaks or runs out of battery, you need to be able to have another one that's considered legitimate.
Where do you keep that little thing and not lose it?
Car keys?
What if someone steals it?
If someone steals it, hopefully your name and password are still secure. And don't forget, you should have two of them. Don't have both of them on the same keychain. Keep the other one at home, and you can go in and unenroll the one that was stolen.
Excuse me, Bob.
Yeah?
Does that, every time your device goes to sleep, to get it awake, you have to have your FIDO key?
I don't know. I've never used it for here.
But if your phone, like, it's PIN activated.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I have not. I'm running a version of iOS that is still getting security updates, but not feature updates. iOS 12, and the support was added in iOS 13, so I don't know how it works.
But, oh, okay, and you don't use an Android. Okay, got it.
Yeah, don't use an Android. The Android devices do better on these keys because Google is a prime mover. Google has the best integration, and they make it easiest of all the major websites to enroll your key as a way of authenticating. Next, don't install any app you don't have to. And I mean have to in capital letters, boldface, italics. Because you never know what an app is going to do. So here, this was a recent headline, an Android security app, a security app with 1 billion downloads is tracking users' web data. Wonderful. They didn't say that in the fine print. That's what they do. In fact, in February, Google threw 600 applications out of its store because they were doing improper and illegal tracking of the activity of users. So only install the apps you need. I mean, really need. And when you no longer need an app, remove it, like immediately. If the vendor put any applications on that you don't understand or don't like, what I call bloatware or crapware, uninstall them. And only install apps from reputable sources. Google, Apple, Mozilla, your bank or your airline. And then finally, if you're on iOS, install Firefox as a browser and use it instead of Safari. Safari is not secure enough for me, and it does not have anti-tracking protection. Now, I have very, very few apps on here. I have Google Maps. I trust Google. And I have another Google application called Google Translate, which is a really nice app. I can point it at signs in Japanese, and it sort of will often tell me what they say. Since I work on Japanese anime as a hobby. I have an Amazon Kindle app, so I could read books. I have Lyft. And Oh, I have a currency converter left over from the days when I used to be a bigwig international traveler.
You should delete that one then.
I should. But for my anime, I am purchasing things in Japan via a friend who lives there, and I pay him back via PayPal. And I have to, in fact, convert the price in yen to US currency for him. So I have an excuse even for that. Yeah?
Quick question. On the subject of removing bloatware,
Yep.
a lot of them cannot be removed.
Yes.
It will bring you back to version 1 or initial version without the update. Would that make it more vulnerable?
Yes. So in that case, just try not to use those applications.
Don't bring it back to the original.
No.
Okay.
And that's why an Android One phone is recommended, because Android One phones have no bloatware.
As a follow-on, I get an Android One. I select my phone based on the Android One availability. But how well they really kept up with the promise, that I couldn't figure it out.
I don't know either. The survey, there's been various surveys, and they've said that Motorola does a reasonably good job of staying up to date, and LG does a reasonably good job of staying up to date. Samsung does not.
So what you're saying is the Android One's security update is still hardware company dependent.
Yes, because they're still allowed to put different chipsets in for the actual phone itself.
I get a Snapdragon,
Yeah.
but that has to do with Snapdragon or the phone manufacturer.
It's what the phone manufacturer chose. There's still a delay, unfortunately. Public connections. Well, one of the wonderful things about a mobile device is you take it places and you want to connect. Well, you need to be a little careful, because a public, unsecured, unencrypted Wi-Fi network will allow others to spy on you and attack your phone. So if you are on a public, unsecured network, don't do anything unless you either are going to a secure website, which says HTTPS, and almost everything is secure these days, fortunately, or unless you are using what's called a virtual private network, which basically establishes a secure encrypted tunnel through the internet to a place you can trust. You even have to be careful about how you charge your phone or your device. Because if you just take the cord and plug into one of these new USB charging stations that you see in the airports, thieves know how to modify them to steal data through them. Because USB, and even the lightning connector, well, at the other end of the lightning connector is a USB. Even the USB has data points. So if you don't want to take the risk, either use the charger that you got, you know, the little wall wart, plug that into the 110 outlet, or you can buy something that is charmingly called a USB condom. Yeah, and what it does is it's basically a USB receptacle, and then on the other end is the part you would plug into the wall. The data wires have been disconnected, only the power wires run through. So it will only transmit power. I actually have one of those by mistake. This was a freebie that was given away at a conference. And it's sort of a universal charger. It's got USB, and then it's got every known phone connection, old Apple, new Apple, micro USB. It doesn't have, as it turns out, the magic Apple chip that allows you to connect to an Apple device. So effectively, it only transmits power. So I ended up with one without knowing about it. But if I was worried, I would get the little plug-in wall wart, the the white thing that plugs into the 110 outlet, and I would use that. So it's really distressing, I think, that we have these wonderful technology innovations, and criminals are being just as innovative based on our advances. You've seen this one before. Still, when it comes to security, we are the weakest link. We human beings are far more vulnerable than the computers are. And text messages can be used for phishing. They can send you a text message saying, this is Bank of America. You know, there's a problem with your account. Log in here. Oops. The browser that you use on your phone will display advertisements by default. And the advertisements may be fake security warnings. Almost all the time when somebody says, I've got a security warning on my phone or on my computer saying your machine is infected, I ask, are you running a browser? Yes. It's an ad. It's an ad disguised to look like a legitimate security warning. There's actually a new version of Firefox. I just saw it. I forgot what the name is. Firefox Focus, which has a built-in crush all ads extension. So you don't even have to install an ad blocker. It just does it.
What's it called again? Firefox?
Firefox Focus, F-O-C-U-S. So don't buy dodgy apps. Don't install dodgy apps. As I said, look for reputable manufacturers. And reputable does not mean that it has a 5-star rating on the App Store. It means that you know who's behind it and you know that they are a serious security company. And try and avoid buying a phone with value-added applications. Someone once analyzed the Samsung value-added applications and found that they were introducing security holes. So, and of course, the other thing about these gadgets is they are really easy to steal. Oh my gosh, you know. And and of course, they're really easy to break. So be sure and put a password and a timer on your phone and use different accounts on your phone. We've already been through that. By the way, if you do break your phone, you need a screen replaced or something like that, there's a really good store in the Westford Four Corners Mall for doing cell phone repairs. It's called Cell Phone CPR. My friend who has the crazy habit of carrying his phone here, which means every time he bends over, the phone goes into the water, onto the rocks as we're walking, whatever, has had his phones repaired there repeatedly. And they do both Android and iPhones at quite reasonable prices. So you don't have to take your iPhone all the way up to Nashua or into Burlington to get the screen fixed. So let me just reiterate the points. Buy the right device. You can buy an iPhone or an iPad, a Google Pixel or a Google tablet, or an Android One device from any of several manufacturers. Secure your device right away. Put a password or a PIN on it. Go through the privacy settings and make sure that the applications don't have excessive access to your data. Keep your device up to date. It's not hard to do. It's not painful. You can usually, in fact, say to do it automatically. Don't use your out-of-support devices on the internet anymore. This is exactly the same as a Windows 7 machine. If you have a Windows 7 machine, you can use it from now till doomsday. Just never connect it to the internet. It's as simple as that. It's fine to use it to run Excel. It's fine to use it to look at your photo albums. Never connect it to the internet. Same thing is true for a phone that no longer is getting fixes. The difference is I can do something about your Windows 7 device. I can put Windows 10 on it. I can't do anything about your out-of-support phone. Was there a question back there? Manage your accounts and passwords carefully. If possible, separate the accounts you use on your phone from the ones you use for your main PC, particularly your email. If you can. If you can't, protect the passwords carefully, either with two-factor authentication, which is better than nothing, or with a FIDO key. Don't install more apps than you need and only get them from reputable sources. And be cautious in public with these devices about how you connect, either to a Wi-Fi network or to a charging station. Now, that's it. I'm happy to take questions. As I said, this is a lot shorter and simpler than the Windows 10 talk. Yes, Roger?
On the Firefox focus that you just mentioned, if there's no ad, how they play that revenue game?
How does
Survive.
Firefox play it, or how do the websites play it?
How Firefox?
Firefox is open source and is supported by donations. Has always been. It never made money off ads.
So they, okay, that explains why they can do it.
Right, which is why you cannot get an ad blocking browser from Google. Because Google does survive by advertisements.
You have a question?
Sure.
My son recently has been compromised with the email. That's Google, and when he called Google security, they explained to him that because they got his password, that they're into everything. So the only way that they can help him is he has to go to the police, get a warrant, and they send it to Google, and they can investigate further. But the question is, his concern is, does this compromise his family, any of us now that he sent things to?
No, it does not, but you need to be very, very cautious about any email coming from that account.
Okay.
Even if he thinks he has control of it again, just discard it, put it in the junk folder. Do not even, if you can, don't even read it. Just say, oh, it's from him, trash pile.
Because they've been able to get into his banking, everything.
Yes,
Everything.
that's exactly what happens is, and here's how they did it. So they compromised his Gmail account.
Yes, that's what it was, yeah.
That probably told them how he logs in, what username he uses at Amazon, his bank, because in most cases you use the same name even if you use a different password. So they went to Amazon, they typed in his email address, which is how you get into Amazon, and then they said, I lost my password. Amazon sent a password reset link to the compromised email account, and the result is now they change his Amazon password. They do the same thing to his bank. So that's why protecting your primary email account is so important. Speaking of people who don't do two-factor authentication, Comcast doesn't do it. So if you've got Comcast email, like me, it's a problem. They don't have any form of two-factor authentication.
They just sent me an email this morning, Bob,
Saying they do?
Xfinity, and it told, I haven't really investigated it yet to see if it will
Help?
help with my Comcast account, because I've changed my, I've changed the password. I can't even begin to tell you how many times now.
Yep.
I'll get something that says it's been compromised.
Right,
I
so,
think it's from my credit card, actually.
Yeah.
It tells me that.
so it's very, if I had a choice, if I could sort of have a do-over from 15 or 20 years ago when I set up, my online identity, first I would never use my real name. So everybody knows my email, bob@supnik.org. It's kind of hard to change that. But if I were starting today, it would be, just an anime editor and it would be on Gmail, and I would be using one of these cards, one of these FIDO keys. Because then I could at least be sure that my primary email account couldn't be hacked, couldn't be phished.
So my question about email on your phone is that I have a Gmail account and it lists, I have 3 email accounts, 1 on Google and 2 on Comcast. And I can access all 3.
That means the phone has all 3 passwords.
Yeah.
I would, unless it's terribly inconvenient, is one of the Comcast accounts your main account, the one that's linked to Amazon in your bank?
Well, the bank has a different username,
Okay.
but you would get rid of the,
I would take your main email account off the phone if you can live with that.
yeah, I can.
Right? I realize it's very harsh. If not, then, as I said, get a Gmail account and get one of these FIDO keys to protect it. Because then you will be about as hack-proof as you can be.
And is that a new Gmail account over and above the one I already own?
No, you could in fact enroll your Gmail account with FIDO keys. Yes?
Is there any negative to implementing a password manager?
Costs money.
No, forget about the money part. It's just, is there any implication as to, what's the reason not to do it?
Well, some of them have had security breaches, none serious, because typically the way they do it is they store your encrypted password in the cloud without the phrase that you use as the master password. You have a master password, and you can make it something that's memorable but not easy to think through, like I love cream cheese, something like that. They cannot recover your password. The cloud company cannot recover your password without the master password.
Does that mean you have to be able to access the internet all the time when you log in?
Yes.
Every time you log in?
Well, not necessarily to log into your machine, but to be able to use the password
Right.
manager. Yes.
So that means if in a place that is no internet access for me, then I cannot log onto my bank.
If you can't.
Right, but if there's no internet access, how can you log into your bank in the first place?
I mean, yeah, but probably.
But say he
But they
can't
are-
access it, but he can't remember it. He can't do anything.
Yes, if you can't remember your passphrase, you're out of luck, which is why, again, these FIDO keys, if I can find where I put mine,
Yeah.
it's in one of these pockets. The FIDO key is your password.
Yeah.
So as long as you don't lose it, that's how you unlock your password manager. Okay? All right, any other questions? Well, let me thank you all for coming out again, and it's really hot in here, so why don't we just plan on adjourning, and if you have any questions, you all know my email address, just feel free to follow up. Okay, thank you.